I don't care what you look like or what you think. I don't care what you do or where you're from. All I care about is that gift hidden inside you. And all I want to do is help it come alive. Because where we're going, we're going to need a lot of heroes. For the record, 10,000 Heroes is brought to you by Momentum Lab. The point of Momentum Lab is to turn idealists into impactors by aligning your dreams and aspirations with success in every area of your life today. Momentum Lab is like a playground for your highest self. We take your dreams seriously and help you remove any blocks to realizing them. We do this through courses, virtual events, in-person events, and our signature year-long accelerator. To join our world, engage in dialogue, meet up in person, and just blow your mind, sign up at MomentumLab.com. Hey everybody, and welcome back to the show, 10,000 Heroes. I'm your host, Ankur Shah Delight. And today is another conversation with Jeff Salzman. Jeff Salzman is my resident integral expert. And I feel so blessed, so privileged every time I get to talk to him. And what I realized as we started that talk a couple days ago that I'm about to air, I realized that what I really want is for a way for this show to make real progress towards the growth, like I said, this teal society stuff in our world. And so starting with me and the listeners. And I was gaming that out with Jeff a little bit. This conversation is a part of that. But there were a lot of other parts of the conversation that we didn't air. But I'm going to explore that a little bit more. And I want to just give you the framework in case you have something to contribute and can help. But I want to do something where this podcast involves dialogue and people coming on here and actually being able to integrate other perspectives or changing their mind or relaxing judgments in a certain way. And I'm not sure exactly the right way to do it. Maybe I'll have a more explicit conversation with Jeff on the air about that soon. But I also just want to invite your feedback of ways that you can imagine we can do that as part of this podcast. So what we actually talk about here is Jeff's boredom with his own ideas and his flagging that our boredom with our own perspective is the gateway drug to accepting other perspectives. And he uses an example of sugar addiction here. So I think it's really great. And as always, thank you, Jeff, and thank you, listeners.
Yeah, so I was saying that I was talking to some friends about my sugar addiction and that I'd gotten rid of everything in the house that has sugar. But then the other night I was desperate. It was late. And I found these candy canes from Christmas. I don't particularly like candy canes, but they were sugar. So I ate them and it was just a fun story. And my one friend said, well, at least you have something to eat. So I think, right, yes, that's a bummer that there are people who don't. But do I always have to conclude that, or can I just have fun and joy and whatever? So I'm kvetching about how she threw a wet blanket over everything. And so that's, at this point in my integral practice, is a tip-off where I see if I'm complaining too much, sometimes I'll catch myself and do the reinterrogation where I think, what point does she have? What am I trying to avoid here? Why am I doing this? And I see that it's true. Every moment there are people who are suffering war zones, earthquakes, sickness, starving, it's as bad as it's ever been still in places. And it reminded me of something that I encountered in my Buddhist studies, and that's the Boddhisatva Vow. And I think probably, you know what that is. A lot of people know what that is. And the idea is that it came out of a reaction to Buddhism being too self-absorbed, where people are trying to liberate themselves from samsara. And it became, sort of objectionable in that way. And so this new school of Buddhism came online that said, no, emptiness is interpenetrated with form. It's the same thing. And that calls us to be aware of the suffering of others, and to actually, the Boddhisatva vow is to put off my own liberation until all other beings are liberated. And there's something beautiful about that. There's something that really is liberating about that, because it does expressly include, contact with the suffering of others. And yet it's a new adventure of your own liberation. I don't know. It sort of all melds together. And this is where integral, I think, comes in handy, is that, we're expressly trying to be multi-perspective. We notice that there's, like, my original reaction was, oh, please, I just wanted to tell a story about my candy canes,
Yeah.
but so that's that native perspective. And then, you identify with, that's boring. You just stay there. You identify with a space within which multiple perspectives are arising, kind of under their own power in a way, because that space has an intelligence, that new identity, this bigger, expanded, inflated identity is wiser and more loving in a way. And so you can actually include both, the tragedy and the joy of life. I always loved joy as being the word that included the suffering of life, as opposed to just happiness.
Mm-hmm.
Has that sort of spiritual dimension. So anyway, that's where, I end. And I think that's, in a way, a story of, practicing my way into some kind of a teal perspective where it's multi-perspectival. I can hold both. I'm not mad anymore, and that's, when we talk about moving into the higher stages, it's not just that we think different things, we think differently, so there's this attraction and this pulling of my being towards wanting to identify with this bigger, more intelligent, loving space that includes all these voices, and how much fun that is. Anyway, something like that.
Yeah. Lovely. Yeah. And that's ultimately what I want to contribute to. So the question is, all right, how do we catalyze that? And my personal bias, my personal interest is not through philosophy and opinions and talking and analysis, but how do we give ourselves and others the experience of what happens when you're done being bored with your own perspective, how great it feels to include and learn from. And it's all, to me, it's about connection. Because then you're, instead of this wall between you and that friend, or between me and, like, the guy who voted differently in the last election, instead of that wall, I can pierce it and I can bring in that. I mean, there's knowledge, but there's also just, like, all of these people, like, in the political world here, I'm just going into the political world. It's all motivated by fear, like there's, fear of the immigrants, or fear of, like, this group in power, or the people in the pizza parlor, or it's fear of the guns and they're going to kill my kids in the school. It's like, from whatever side, it's like, we're just trying to, like, live our lives and have our families stay alive. And then everyone just has fear about different things. But at the root of it, it's all the same shit. It's all fear. And so there should be a way I can connect with that guy, even if I am his bogeyman and he's my bogeyman, We're supposedly afraid of each other. We still are sharing on this root emotional level, like fear for our own safety in this unexpectedly pluralistic society.
Yeah. And I think the only thing you can do in that situation, you can't make them be less fearful, but you can be less fearful. You can turn that sort of hardened, critique into curiosity about them. And then they stop being afraid too. And you have real connection, right?
Yeah. Well,
something like
thank you,
that.
Jeff. That is exactly what we're going to do.
Hi everyone, this is Martin Sand, producer, editor, and sound designer for the 10,000 Heroes Joe. I just wanted to take a minute to thank our guest for joining us, and also thank you for listening. 10,000 Heroes is brought to you by Momentum Lab. This is the team. Pierre does our artwork, DJ Plainview composed our theme music, and I handle all the editing and sound design. And now, we are closing down this episode with a word from our main sponsor, who also happens to be our host, Anchor.
Hey, everybody. Thanks again for listening. If you like this episode, there's 2 things I want you to do. 1, introduce me to the most inspiring person you know so I can have them on the show. And 2, take the next step towards us hanging out in person. Maybe that's signing up for the newsletter. Maybe that's attending an upcoming in-person or virtual event. What I'm trying to do here is destroy the basic one-to-many nature of this medium, podcast, entertainment, and replace it with something that actually builds connections between people, the beloved community, getting closer together, understanding each other, one conversation at a time. So, join me. Bye!